Great, welcome back everyone. So we are in chapter 12. We went over the axial muscles 2 nights ago, and tonight we're going to go over the appendicular muscles, which will hopefully be a good help for your quiz tonight. So all of your appendicular muscles will be muscles that move your pectoral girdle, the upper limb, and then the pelvic girdle and the lower limb. If you remember, the pectoral girdle is made up of your scapula and clavicle, and the pelvic girdle is your os coxae bone and where it connects to the femur. So we're going to be looking at these muscles. Your appendicular muscles control all upper and lower limbs, and then those girdles we talked about. And muscles are grouped by their location or part of their skeleton that they move. So we're going to go through these as we look at each kind of grouping of the skeleton that they move. Muscles function that stabilize or move the scapula. These are listed here. So these are all muscles that will stabilize your scapula or move the scapula. So your pectoralis minor, serratus anterior, subclavius, trapezius, levator scapulae elevates the scapula, and then your rhomboids. So we can kind of see some of these muscles here. So these are anterior muscles that are associated with the proximal upper limb. So proximal meaning closer to the point of attachment in the pectoral girdle region. So this is looking at a front view. You can see your pectoralis major here. If we look at ones that can move the scapula, I should point out too that every time that you see a model like this, the model is divided into the right and the left half. And the right side of the model in anatomical position always shows superficial muscles. And the left side of the model in anatomical position shows deeper muscles that would be underneath the superficial if we were to remove them. So our pectoralis minor on the left side of the model is shown with your pec major removed. You can see how your pec minor is attached to this coracoid process of the scapula. We'll see a lot more of the muscles that move the scapula from a posterior view. You can see the serratus anterior kind of peeking its head out, connected to the ribs on the left side of the model. A great way to see the serratus anterior is actually on the right side of the model. It looks like the serrated edge of a knife. Can you guys see my cursor moving at all?
Yeah.
You
yes.
can? Oh, yeah. Good. Okay. Oh,
yeah.
Good. So the serratus anterior is this muscle right here. It looks like the serrated edge of a knife. So let's take a look at a posterior view, hopefully. You have your deltoid, covers the shoulder. So here's a look at the posterior view. Your trapezius is a diamond-shaped flat muscle that will move your scapula. So there's your trapezius. It goes all the way up to the back of your skull, connects to your scapula, and then connects down to your vertebrae. So this is the superficial view. And then if we look at the deep view on the right side, the trapezius has been removed. And you can see your rhomboids are muscles that attach the scapula to your vertebrae. You have a minor and a major. You have a levator scapulae muscle that will help to elevate the scapula. I'm trying to focus on ones that are in your lab list. The supraspinatus and the infraspinatus muscles lie in the supraspinous and infraspinous fossa on the scapula. So supraspinatus is superior to the spine, infraspinatus is inferior to the spine. Right underneath your infraspinatus, you see a teres minor muscle, which is peeking out, and then the teres major muscle is further below that. So these are all muscles that are attached to the scapula. This is a great view of your latissimus dorsi muscle. It's a big flat muscle on the back. So here's your latissimus dorsi. And if we look at a superficial view, you see your serratus posterior inferior underneath that and an external oblique muscle. So some of these actions of these muscles that move the scapula, it tells you about retracting, what that means. So retracting means sitting up straight, which is what none of us, I was just sitting forward right now, but retracting the scapula is putting your shoulders back. Good posture. Protracting the scapula is moving your shoulders forward. And it lists retractors and protractors there, different muscles that do that. Then it lists muscles that will elevate your scapula, which brings it up. Depressing brings it down. Superior rotating it would be rotating your arm forward, and inferior rotating would be rotating your scapula back. So your first question, if you guys have your notes there, is where is your trapezius and what is its action? The trapezius, where is that located? If anyone wants to talk.
The shoulders and back?
Yep, so it's located, it's like a diamond-shaped muscle. This is a good view of your trapezius. So it's a diamond-shaped muscle. It'll cover all of your back. The right side has been removed here to show muscles below it, but it's a diamond-shaped muscle on your back. And then what are its action? It has a lot of actions that you can see listed here. So it's one of the elevators of the scapula. So it elevates the scapula, depresses the scapula, and superiorly rotates the scapula. So that's your answer for number 1 in your notes. Okay.
Wait, you said superiorly rotates?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, superiorly rotates.
Okay, thank you.
So elevates, depresses, and superiorly rotates the scapula. A lot of these notes that I write, like they're direct test questions that'll be on your next lecture exam, which will hopefully be a help. Okay, muscles that move the glenohumeral joint. What's the glenohumeral joint? Where do those words come from? Gleno comes from glenoid cavity on the scapula, and humeral comes from your humerus. So these will be muscles now that move just your shoulder, the ball and socket joint of your shoulder. You can see them listed here. I'm going to go ahead and show you a posterior view of it. The supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and teres major are big ones that help to stabilize your shoulder and that joint, the glenohumeral joint. There's 11 muscles that actually will cross this joint and move the arm. 2 of them attach to the trunk and are prime movers of the joint, and those are the latissimus dorsi and the pectoralis major. So these are muscles with an axial skeleton attachment, but they will be inserted on this joint area. So we say that they're part of the appendicular muscles. 9 arm muscles attached to your scapula. So we're still talking about muscles that move this kind of shoulder joint and arm. We'll talk about your biceps brachii, your triceps brachii, the deltoid, the coracobrachialis, the teres major, and then the 4 muscles that we call the rotator cuff muscles. And you'll hear about injury to the rotator cuff muscles, and they are the muscles that are involved in moving your shoulder joint. And again, they'll be injured in pitchers, volleyball spikers, other people who use their arms a lot. Who else uses their arms a lot like that? I don't know. That's all I can think of. So here are your rotator cuff muscles, supraspinatus, infraspinatus, the teres minor, and then the subscapularis is included in that. And the subscapularis is the muscle that lies in the subscapular fossa of the scapula itself. These are all muscles that are on your lab exam sheet, and just knowing those. The rotator cuff muscles, it doesn't include your teres minor. The teres minor muscle is further below your teres major. And an easy way to remember your teres major muscle is you'll see it actually kind of dive underneath your triceps and disappear. But these are the 4 rotator cuff muscles. Just holler out if you have a question at all, too. All right, so this is a summary of the muscle actions that move this glenohumeral joint. We talk about these actions as abduction, which is again taking a arm and moving it away from midline. Adduction is moving it back, adding it back to midline. Extension and flexion. Flexion is always decreasing in angle, and extension is increasing in angle. And then lateral and medial rotation. Laterally rotating is rotating laterally, and medially rotating is rotating it back in. So that's a summary of those muscle actions. Okay, then we'll move down the arm itself. So we're looking at just the upper arm, the brachium. So the anterior compartment of your upper arm contains all your elbow flexors. And this will be the answer to number 2 on your notes. What are the principal elbow flexors located on the anterior side of the humerus? And you have 3 of them, and they're listed right here: the biceps brachii, brachialis, and the brachioradialis. I wish I should probably, but flexion of the arm is doing this, like doing a bicep curl. So these are all the muscles that are located on the anterior side of the arm, of the upper arm. And those are all your principal elbow flexors. The posterior compartment, we sometimes call those the antagonists because they have opposite actions. And they are all, they contain the elbow extensors, which is extending your elbow would be stretching it out like that. So that's extension, is straightening it out in the back. And your triceps brachii is an elbow extensor, and your anconeus is also an elbow extensor. Your anconeus is like a muscle that's this big that kind of surrounds your elbow. So everyone got that for number 2? The elbow flexors are listed there, those 3 you should know. And then number 3, I guess, is an answer as well. The prime extensor of your elbow joint is your triceps brachii. The anconeus helps a little bit, but your primary elbow extensor is your triceps. So let's take a look at these. So here are your biceps. So this is an anterior look of the right arm. It's called biceps because it has 2 heads. Sorry if you can hear cars going by at busy street. The biceps brachii, there's a long head and a short head. So that's why we call it biceps, bi meaning 2. Well, I'll show you a posterior view showing the triceps. The brachialis is right below your biceps, and the brachioradialis is this guy right here. The brachioradialis starts in the upper arm, and then it follows down along the lateral side of your forearm as well. So these are anterior muscles that move your elbow or flex it. Here's a look at them kind of one at a time. So here's your biceps. On the left, the superficial view, and the deep view shows the biceps removed and how the brachialis lies right underneath your biceps. The coracobrachialis isn't involved in elbow flexion, but you can see here it's called coracobrachialis because it attaches to the coracoid process of the scapula. So that's why we call it the coracobrachialis. Then a posterior view shows your primary elbow extender. And there's your triceps in the back. There's 3 heads to the triceps. That's why we call it tri. There's a lateral head, a long head, and I think there's a short head, but it's kind of underneath the other 2. And you can see your little anconeus muscle. It's just a teeny tiny muscle that's on the back of the elbow that helps with elbow extension as well. Okay. Oh, and the medial head of the triceps. There it is, not short head, but medial. All right. Then we'll talk about your forearm muscles. And you have a lot of muscles in your forearm. And again, the forearm is this area right here. It's such a tiny part of your body, but you have many, many muscles in your forearm. And that's because their action is to flex and extend your fingers and your wrist. So you need a lot of muscles to do that. Some forearm muscles pronate or supinate the forearm. Here are the muscles that pronate the forearm. and then muscles that supinate the forearm. I don't see any questions about this on your notes. The nice thing about the actions of these muscles is that their action is right in their name. So the pronator teres and pronator quadratus will both pronate the forearm. And again, pronate means to turn your forearms back as if you're picking up potato chips anatomically. Supinate is anatomically your palms are facing forward. So your supinator does that, and that's on the posterior side. Okay, so let's look at some of these. This picture is showing the difference between supination and pronation. And so this is a right forearm. You can see the model at the top. He's in supination right now. And when he crosses his arm over, so his palms face back, that's pronation. And you can see how the pronator teres will pull on his radius and kind of switch his radius over or pull the radius over the ulna. So those are the pronators and supinator muscles. Pronator teres and supinator on your lab list. I can't remember if pronator quadratus is, but pronator quadratus is on the inferior side of the two, or closer down at the bottom.
Professor?
Yeah.
So for the those pronators, they move the bone like to cross over each other? Is that?
To move the bone as to pronate the forearm. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a good question. So you can see how the pronator teres is wrapped around your radius, and the pronator quadratus is wrapped around the radius at the bottom. So if you think about that, when that muscle contracts or shortens, it'll pull the radius over the ulna, so they move the forearm into the pronation position.
Okay.
Then the supinator will have the opposite effect. The supinator will, you see how it's, I think underneath there, it'll be attached to the ulna, so it'll bring everything back to the supination position. Okay. So here's a summary of those muscle actions. Showing flexion, extension, and pronation and supination. Okay, then we get to forearm muscles that move your wrist, your hand, your fingers, and flexion, which flexion of your fingers would be moving them all to make a fist, and extension of your fingers would be spreading them out. Flexion of your wrist would be flexing, decreasing the angle, and extension would be straightening out your wrist. The nice thing about these is that, so all of the muscles on the anterior side of your forearm, they will all flex the wrist, the hand, and the fingers, and that makes sense. So anterior side of the forearm, if these guys contract, they'll all flex your fingers and flex the wrist. The posterior side of the forearm in the back, the posterior compartment, they will all extend your fingers or extend your wrist. So anterior flexes the wrist, hand, and fingers, and posterior extends the wrist, hand, and fingers. Let's talk about tendons that pass through the carpal tunnel, because this helps answer number 4, which is the retinaculum. And the retinaculum is a piece of fibrous, it's a thickened fibrous band of fascia. So it's just a piece of thick fascia or connective tissue that covers the carpal tunnel. And the carpal tunnel is an area in your wrist where all the tendons from the muscles will pass through into your fingers. So if you think of your arm, you have muscles on the front and back side of the forearm. Those muscles are all attached to tendons that will reach out and control how your fingers move or how your wrist moves. And those tendons all pass, most of them all pass underneath your flexor retinaculum. And the flexor retinaculum is like a piece of masking tape or wristwatch that keeps your tendons from bulging out. So it just keeps them together. I'll never forget when I dissected a cadaver, it was always fun to cut through the flexor retinaculum because then all the tendons popped out and you could like pull on the tendon and control which tendon went to each finger. I thought it was cool. Hopefully you guys get to do that someday. Also in this, so the carpal tunnel, it's a tunnel, and it's the tunnel of the carpals. So carpal means wrist. So that's where you get the name carpal tunnel. You can see a nerve that passes in this carpal tunnel, and that's called the median nerve. If you do a lot of computer work where your hands are like this and your carpal tunnels are bent and there's a lot of pressure being put on that median nerve, that can give you some pain in the carpal tunnel, and that's where we get carpal tunnel syndrome. What else? So, but for number 4, a retinaculum is a thickened fibrous band of fascia, and it prevents all the tendons from your forearm muscles from bulging out. So it just keeps them contained in the wrist area. Okay? There's one muscle. Hi, Emma. There's one muscle in the forearm that its tendon does not go through the carpal tunnel, it goes over the carpal tunnel, and I think we'll get to that in a little bit. And that's the tendon you guys can see if you bend your arm like this, or your wrist, you can kind of see a tendon pop out in your wrist. About 10% of individuals lack that tendon. So you have the muscle in your forearm, but they lack the tendon that goes over the retinaculum. So you can check yourselves to see if you have that tendon there. Okay, that's a lot on that. We'll keep moving here. So there's superficial and deep layers to the flexor muscle. So we'll start on the anterior part of the forearm. And so these are all your flexor muscles. So a lot of their names have flexor in them. You'll notice a lot of their names have radialis or ulnaris, and that will tell you if the muscle's on the radius side where your thumb is, or the ulnar side, which is where your pinky will be. The palmaris longus is a muscle that goes right in the middle. And again, that has a tendon that goes over your retinaculum. So that's why you can see it in your wrist. And that's absent in about 10% of us. I usually have a couple students who don't have it in each class. Then you have an intermediate layer and a deep layer. Not all of these you need to know. Flexor digitorum profundus, flexor digitorum superficialis. If something has digitorum in it, it means its tendons are going to flex your digits or your fingers. So this is a look. Just holler out at me if you guys have questions as we go through these forearm. Your brachioradialis is, again, it's one of your primary flexors of the elbow, and it starts in the upper arm, and then it'll travel down the thumb side of the arm. Do you want to say hi? This is Emma.
Hi, Emma.
Oh, hi.
Hi, Emma.
Okay. Are you guys making s'mores? They're having a fire tonight.
Mommy, can I sleep in the tent tonight?
No, you can't sleep in the tent tonight.
Aww.
She slept in the tent last night. Okay. Because Poppy needs to get his rest. Sorry, guys. Do you want to say it? Just say one more thing, and then you can go.
Mommy, can we sleep in the tent?
No, we can't.
Why?
Okay, I'm going to keep talking, okay?
Why, Mommy?
You can ask Poppy, okay?
If he suggested what?
He won't say yes.
How'd you know?
Okay.
Who said yes?
He won't.
How'd you know?
Okay, I'm going to keep talking.
Mommy, how'd you know?
You need to go.
Thank you.
That's what it's all about.
Like, Mommy, you know Poppy's gonna say no, but Poppy gets to choose.
Poppy can choose.
Like, you know, he's gonna say no, but
Yes. Sorry, I just realized this is still being recorded and everyone will see this on YouTube. I might have to make this on the
This
side.
is better than being in class.
Okay. That's one of my kids. They slept in the tent last night. Him and her and yeah, the dad. Anyway, brachioradialis. So we're on the anterior side of the forearm. You can see your flexor carpi radialis. So if we work our way from like lateral to medial. The brachioradialis will have the radialis word in it because it's on the radius side where your thumb is. Flexor carpi radialis will also eventually make its way to the thumb. Palmaris longus, and then the flexor carpi ulnaris will be on the pinky side. Does that all make sense to people? I think those will be in your, those are a part of your lab list. Your pronator teres is in there as well. It's the one right before your flexor carpi radialis. I wish we had models here, guys. Sorry, it's hard to do over here. This is showing a deeper view, a right anterior forearm, an intermediate view, and a deeper view. So just the muscles below it. And again, the name of the muscle kind of tells you what it does. Flexor digitorum goes to your digits. Flexor digitorum profundus is deeper, also goes to your digits.
So, Professor, the tendon from those run all the way to the ends of your fingers, or?
Yep, to control the flexion of your fingers.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can see the tendons running through the carpal tunnel right here. You can see more of the tendons running through as well. So that's why your flexor retinaculum is important, because it just keeps all these tendons together. Okay. Backside, so on the posterior side of the forearm, these are all of your extensor muscles. So they will all extend your fingers, so straighten them out, extend your wrist, kind of pull it back, and they will be named for radialis if they're on the thumb side, digitorum if the tendon goes to the digits, digiti minimi, what finger do you think that controls? Your digiti minimi finger.
Is that the pinky finger?
The pinky finger, yep. Extensor carpi ulnaris will be on your pinky side. And then a deeper layer, you have an abductor pollicis. What do you think that action is? Abductor pollicis. Your pollicis is your thumb.
Thumbs up.
Yep, so abductor would be abduction. So taking your thumb away from like the midline of your hand, abducting it. Extensor pollicis longus, pollicis brevis, extensor indicis goes to the index finger. So this is a look at your posterior forearm muscles. I can't remember how many you have here on your lab list. There's an extensor digitorum that you'll see tendons going into the digits of your fingers. Extensor carpi ulnaris, extensor pollicis brevis will be by your thumb. I try not to ask too many forearm question muscles because I know there's a lot of muscles there. Let me go to the posterior side, a deeper view. You can see here how your abductor pollicis longus will have a tendon that reaches out to the thumb. Extensor pollicis brevis, extensor pollicis longus. You have a lot of muscles going to your thumb to help you, make a thumbs up. Maybe that's why we have all these muscles. Extensor indicis is a little tiny muscle that will control and go to your index finger to help you extend, probably to point at people. Maybe that's why we have that one. Dorsal interossei are muscles between the palmar bones in your hand. The intrinsic muscles of your hand and your foot, I don't ask you too many questions about. They're divided into 3 groups, the thenar, hypothenar, and mid-palmar. The thenar group muscles affect the motion of your thumb, your flexor pollicis brevis, abductor pollicis brevis, and opponens pollicis. The hypothenar group affects the motions of fingers 5 and include the following. So motion of finger 5 is your pinky finger. So that's your flexor. They'll all have digiti minimi in it if it affects your pinky finger. Mid-palmar group muscles affect the motion of all the fingers of the thumb and include your lumbricals, your dorsal interossei, your palmar interossei, and your adductor pollicis. So these are kind of all the muscles in your hand. I don't ask you guys too many questions about this, but number 5 and 6 kind of relate to these. What's the action of your abductor digiti minimi muscle? What do you guys think is the answer to number 5?
That's to extend your pinky.
Yep, so abduction, your pinky, and abduction and adduction in your hands. If you think of like your middle finger's the midline, abduction is moving it away from midline and adduction is moving it back. So the abductor digiti minimi is pinky finger abduction. What about the action of the adductor pollicis?
To curl your thumb back in, right?
Yep,
Or
so
to bring it back in.
Yep, so to bring your thumb to adduct it back in. So adduct your thumb. Good. Questions on the upper limb? That kind of takes us through the upper limb. So this is a good summary of the actions at the wrist and the hand. And the nice thing is again, if it's a flexor or extensor, it'll have its action name in the name of the muscle itself. Okay, so now we'll move down to the lower limb. Your lower limb includes the largest and most powerful muscles in the body, and they're organized into, if they move your hip, joint, and thigh, and muscles that move your knee, joint, or leg. So these two groups of muscles. Muscles of your anterior thigh compartment will flex the hip. So flexing the hip would be as if you were doing a sit-up and you sit all the way up. That's hip flexion. So decreasing the angle between your body and your leg. So that's flexion of the hip. Most of them proximally attached to your os coxae and distally to the femur. So these are your thigh flexors, your psoas major, iliacus, sartorius, and rectus femoris will all flex your hip. There's 6 muscles in your medial compartment of your thigh. So these are on the inside of your leg. You have your adductors, because your adductors will bring your thigh, if this is your thigh, they'll bring your thigh or your leg, adducting it back to the midline. So because they're located on the inner thigh, when they contract, they'll pull your leg back to the center. We'll talk about these: gracilis, adductor magnus. There's only one muscle in your lateral thigh compartment. So if you put your hands kind of on your hips, there's only one muscle on your lateral thigh compartment, and that's your tensor fascia latae. That's a unique muscle because it's the only muscle on the lateral side of your thighs. It'll abduct and medially rotate your thigh, and it attaches to your iliotibial tract, which will extend all the way from your iliac crest to the lateral condyle of your tibia. Then you have gluteal muscles. I promise I'll show you pictures soon. They're in the gluteal region. They extend, abduct, and rotate your hip joint. You have 3 types of gluteus muscles. You have the maximus, medius, and minimus. Many of these, I think the only one you guys, or the only ones you need to know on your lab exam list are the maximus and the medius maybe. But these are all just muscles that are in the gluteal region. And then muscles of your posterior thigh compartment will extend the hip and flex the leg. So extension of the hip would be as if you were standing up and pull, like just try to push your leg straight back, as if you were trying to balance on one leg. And these will include your hamstring muscles, and you have 3 hamstring muscles there. Your biceps femoris semimembranosus and semitendinosus. And that's the answer actually to number 7. We'll come back to it a little bit, but for number 7 on your notes, it asks you what the hamstring muscles are. And the 3 are your biceps femoris, semimembranosus, and semitendinosus. And again, their action is to extend the hip, or as if you were standing up and stretching your leg straight back, and also flexing the leg. When you see the word flexing the leg, think of flexing the knee. And to flex your knee, if you just think of your hamstring muscles in the back of your legs, if they contract or shorten, they'll pull your lower leg up. So it's if you were trying to do butt kicks, like kick yourself in the butt with your foot, that's flexing your leg or flexing your knee. So those are your hamstring muscles. Okay, so let's look at some of these here. This is showing muscles that move your hip and thigh. Let's look at the lateral view first. You see your gluteus maximus and medius. You have many other glute muscles below that too. Here's your tensor fascia latae. Again, it's the only lateral thigh muscle. It'll help to adduct your thigh or bring your thigh away from midline. It's connected to this fibrous piece of tissue called your iliotibial tract or IT band. You also might hear people getting injuries to their IT band as well. And then I'm going to show you a different picture of your front and back view, hopefully. Here's a lot of muscles in the gluteal region that you don't need to worry about, but it shows the gluteus maximus cut through and the muscles shown below it. All right, I wanted to show you, okay, then we'll get here. This is a good summary of which muscles do abduction, adduction, extension, and flexion of the hip itself. But I want to show you a little more, where these muscles are located. The anterior compartment of your thigh contains muscles that extend your knee joint, and extending your knee joint just means if you were kicking a ball. So kicking the ball would just be complete extension. They're collectively called your quadriceps muscle, and these are the 4 quadricep muscles, and you can write those down. So you have 4 quadricep muscles. How many hamstring muscles did you have? Anyone remember?
3.
3, good. So 4 quadricep muscles. They're collectively called the quadriceps femoris, and their action is to extend the knee joint and leg as if you were kicking a ball. Rectus femoris, vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, and vastus intermedius. The answer to number 12, if you're in your notes, what is the most powerful muscle in the body? We consider your quadriceps femoris, kind of the whole grouping of all 4 of them, as the most powerful muscle in the body. So your quadriceps femoris, number 12, is the most powerful muscle in the body. Okay, so let's take a look at where these guys are. Your
Can you go back? The action of the quadriceps was to extend
the knee joint and leg. So basically extending your knee joint or extension of your leg.
And you said like kicking a ball.
Kicking a ball, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Or extending just as if you're straightening out your legs, yeah. Good question. Before we talk about your quadriceps, I want to point out here, your iliacus and your psoas major have actions in your hip. And these are 2 muscles that are on your lab exam sheet, I think. The iliacus lies in the iliac fossa of your ilium bone. And your psoas major is a large muscle that'll connect to your vertebrae and then also down through the hip to control actions of the hip. From here, I want to point out the sartorius muscle as well. The sartorius muscle is the longest muscle in the body. It's shaped like, it's kind of curved and shaped like an S here. So here's your sartorius muscle. And that is the answer to number 10. The longest muscle in the body is your sartorius muscle. And then I'll show you a better picture of the medial view, but your gracilis is on the medial side of the leg with the adductor longus in front of it. And these are all muscles that adduct the thigh, which brings us to number 9. I'll come to number 9 in a second after we talk about the quadricep muscles. So your rectus femoris is the central quadricep muscle. It has this little fibrous white line going down the middle of it, and that's just to connect kind of the two pieces of it together down the middle. So that's your rectus femoris. And then you have a vastus lateralis is the quadricep muscle that's on the lateral side of the anterior thigh. The vastus medialis is on the medial side of the anterior thigh. So they're lateral and medial to the rectus femoris muscle. If we take off your rectus femoris, we can see the intermedius, which is below it. So again, you had 4 quadricep muscles. You had a vastus lateralis and medialis on either side of the rectus femoris. But if we take off the rectus femoris, right underneath it or deep to that, we have our vastus intermedius, and that's your 4th quadricep muscle.
Professor?
Yeah.
In this, like on the slide, as it goes right, is it going deeper? Like, are the muscles, or are they just?
I think it's just, it took off your rectus femoris, not necessarily deeper because, I mean, yeah, the vastus lateralis and medialis are underneath your rectus femoris, but they you can still see them through without removing the rectus femoris.
Okay, I see it.
Yeah. I think what it's showing mainly is that the vastus intermedius is really below it.
Okay.
Good question. Okay. Okay, so here are your posterior thigh compartment muscles. These are your hamstring muscles. So this kind of answers number 7 again. And what their action is, they will flex the knee joint and extend the hip. And again, flexing your knee joint is the action of as if you were kicking yourself in the butt with your foot. I know that's kind of not appropriate to say, but it's the best way I can get you to picture flexing your knee joint. Also, extension the hip is if your leg was straight, but you pulled your leg back. Would be kind of, think of like opening up your hip. So like extending your hip would be pulling your leg back. These are the 3 hamstring muscles if you haven't gotten them yet. And hopefully we'll show you a picture here. So here is a posterior view of a right leg. The 3 hamstring muscles, the easiest way to remember them are the biceps femoris will always be on the lateral side of your hamstring muscles. So you have a long head and a short head of your biceps femoris. Don't worry about that. Just know that your biceps femoris is on the lateral side of the hamstring muscles. And on the medial side, you have the semimembranosus and tendinosus, which are right on top of each other. So they are layered on top of each other. And it's kind of hard to tell from this picture, but the semitendinosus is on top. So a T, tendinosus is on top of the membranosus, and the membranosus is below the tendinosus. So those are your 3 hamstring muscles. Your biceps femoris is lateral, semitendinosus is on top of the semimembranosus. This is a better view of them, showing the semitendinosus and biceps femoris right next to each other. Tendinosus is medial, biceps femoris is lateral, and the next picture over in the center is showing your semimembranosus with the semitendinosus removed. Okay, before we move on to the lower leg, because that's kind of the end of this lecture, then I want to go back to talk about which muscles adduct your thigh. And they're just, I remember now, there's just not a really good picture of these adductor muscles. So I might pull up a picture from the lab. But adduction of the thigh comes from your adductor brevis, adductor longus, and magnus, your gracilis and pectineus. So this column that says adduction, summary of muscle actions at the hip joint and thigh. These are the muscles that adduct the thigh, your adductor brevis, longus, magnus, gracilis, and pectineus. And if you guys can bear with me, I'm going to just show you. Maybe I won't. Give me 1 second. I'm going to try to pull up the PowerPoint that I had before. To show you a better picture of this. Okay. Okay, do you guys see this PowerPoint? The muscles one?
Yes.
Oh, no, it just stopped. Sorry, just lost me again, guys. Thanks for your patience. I'm only showing you this because there'll be questions on. Okay. Okay, let's try this. Okay, so this is the muscle PowerPoint that hopefully you guys have had a chance to look over. I'm probably going to take it down off Canvas soon, but I just wanted to show you a medial view of the inner thigh. Take a look at these muscles that adduct the thigh. So if we look at an inner thigh view, eventually we'll get there. So here is your gracilis on an inner thigh view. The gracilis runs right down the middle of the inner thigh, and right in front of the gracilis is your adductor longus, and right behind your gracilis is the adductor magnus. So these are adductor muscles, they're on the inner thigh, so they will adduct your thigh. Okay, questions?
What's the, do we have to know where the adductor brevis is?
No, no.
And the pectineus, we don't have to know that one either? Just to know that those adduct the thigh.
Just
That's
know that
it?
they adduct the thigh, yes.
Okay.
All right, are you guys back in this PowerPoint now? Okay. All right, does everyone see the muscles of the lower leg up in the screen now? This PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, oh, thanks, okay. So we'll finish up with muscles that move the ankle, foot, and toes. These are called the crural muscles, and that's the answer to number 11. What is the action of the crural muscles? And these are muscles that all move the ankle, foot, and toes with either flexion or extension. We divide them into an anterior side of the lower leg, a lateral side, or a posterior side. The nice thing about the anterior compartment, these will be primarily dorsiflexors. So they will dorsiflex the foot and extend the toes. So their names will all be with extensor, digitorum, hallucis, tibialis anterior is the answer to number 13. The primary dorsiflexor of the foot at the ankle is the tibialis anterior. When we talk about dorsiflexion, if these are my toes, it would be pulling your toes up to touch your nose. So dorsiflexion, think toes to your nose. Your tibialis anterior is the muscle on the anterior side of your lower leg, and it's the primary dorsiflexor. So let's take a look at some of these anterior leg muscles. Here's your tibialis anterior. It will travel right alongside of your tibia. So there's your tibialis anterior. Extensor digitorum longus will be below that. It'll extend your toes, which kind of straightens your toes out. And the fibularis longus is on the fibula side of the lower leg, as well as the fibularis brevis. Here's a look at these muscles kind of one at a time. Tibialis anterior, extensor digitorum longus, and extensor hallucis longus. Muscles in your lateral leg will evert the foot. So eversion is moving the foot out, and inversion is moving it back, and plantar flex the foot. So this idea of plantar flexion means to kind of plant your foot down as if you're running or taking a step. So that's what plantar flexion is planting your foot down, so pushing your toes downward. And dorsiflexion is doing this, moving your toes back up. So the lateral compartments will do those two because it's on the lateral side of the lower leg. They're named after the fibula because that's where your fibula is located. So here are some fibularis longus. The fibularis longus muscle has a tendon that'll curl around the lateral malleolus of your fibula. There's your fibularis longus and brevis, again on the fibula side of the lower leg. And then muscles in the posterior compartment will all plantar flex the foot and include these, your gastrocnemius, your soleus, your plantaris, and then flexor muscles. Tibialis posterior and popliteus is a tiny muscle kind of behind your knee. So your gastrocnemius is your big calf muscle. Your gastrocnemius has a lateral and a medial head to it. One student one semester asked me why it's named gastrocnemius, and then I had to look it up. So in Latin, the word gastro, does anyone know any idea what gastro has to do with? In Latin, it has to do with like belly or stomach, your gastro. And nemius has to do with the knee. So it literally means it's the belly of your knee, the gastrocnemius. And it kind of makes sense. It's a big kind of belly-shaped muscle right below your knee. Your soleus is also a plantar flexor posterior side. It's right, your soleus is right below the gastrocnemius. You can see here in the deeper view, the soleus has been actually cut to show even deeper muscles. But the soleus lies right underneath your gastrocnemius. The gastrocnemius is connected to your calcaneus via the calcaneal tendon, and you can see that there. Leg muscles, tibialis posterior. These are even deeper posterior leg muscles that I won't ask you guys about, but these will all be flexor, plantar flexors of your ankle. Okay. Summary of the muscles. I wonder why I included that there. Sorry if you guys can hear my kids in the bathtub. I think they're singing. Here are summary of, this is a good chart listing the summary of the muscle actions of your knee joint and leg. Extension again, as if you were kicking a ball, and flexion. These are all muscles that would help you kick yourself in the butt or flex your knee back up. So your heel would touch your gluteus maximus muscle. I'll be more proper that way.
I have one question.
Yes.
Went over 13 really fast and I didn't get a chance to write it down. Was it the tibialis anterior?
Tibialis anterior. Yep, the primary dorsiflexor of the foot at the ankle.
Okay.
Yep, tibialis anterior. And again, dorsiflexion. Tibialis anterior is on the front side of the lower leg. So it'll pull your toes up. So dorsiflexion is toes to your nose. So all anterior lower leg muscles do dorsiflexion, and all the muscles on the posterior lower leg, such as this view, they will all plant your foot down. Your gastrocnemius, as if you were to do calf raises, those would be your posterior lower leg. Okay, intrinsic muscles of the foot. I don't ask you guys many questions about this. I just want you to kind of appreciate the complexity of these foot muscles, there's just like the hand, you have a ton of muscles in your feet and your hands in between bones. And then you have tendons that are coming from muscles in the lower leg that are helping to control extension and flexion of your toes. So it's just a really intricate system. Interossei are between bones, and then this is a good kind of final review table of actions of your foot and your toes and the muscles that do those actions. This is a great, I'll let you guys do this on your own, but this takes you to just a website of a good review game of muscles in the body, if you guys want to review that. And I'll answer any questions that you might have. I'm just gonna go ahead and take off something because your quiz will be starting at 8 p.m. and you guys have 24 hours to do it. So I'm just gonna unpublish some of the PowerPoints. Any final questions that you guys have for me?
Can you explain again what it means when you like extend the hip and you flex the hip?
Yes, those are great questions. So extending the hip, let me see if I can just pull up a good picture of this because this just might be easier to do. I'm not in front of the class where I can like be the model for this. Okay. I found a good picture, so I'm just going to share my screen here for just something I found on the internet. So do you guys see my safari kind of in the middle here?
Yes.
So flexion of the hip would be like pulling your entire leg up. So as you're decreasing the angle of your hip. So thinking like you're kind of closing your hip. And extension, you're pulling your leg back and you're lifting your leg up. So you're opening up the hip. So that is flexion and extension of the hip.
Mm-hmm. So flexing would go like forward. So like if you're straight, so if you're standing straight, that's like the kind of angle you're looking for?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Not to confuse you guys, but this is showing flexion and extension of your knee then. So this picture is showing flexion of your knee and extension of your knee. So it kind of takes on opposite, whether you're talking about your hip or your knee are two very different body parts. Okay, good question though. Any other questions? I'm just gonna go ahead and stop recording.